Hello and welcome to Industry Week 21 at Confetti. Today's guest will be Sylvia Massy, interviewed by Mandy Parnell, who's been with us all day. She got interviewed before, then interviewed Susan Rogers, and then she'll be interviewing Sylvia Massy shortly. So a big thank you to both Mandy and Sylvia for joining us. And if you want to ask any questions, just use the chat in the Zoom meeting, and you can ask any questions, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. But yeah, if you don't put any questions, you'll never get asked. So don't forget, you can still book on to other Industry Week events this week. In fact, we've got Marta Saloni tonight. If you haven't submitted a mix for that, it is too late, but you can still come along. She'll be critiquing loads of mixes and giving a 2-hour talk tonight. So please book onto that if you haven't already. And the code to get in will be ST01. Okay, and if you can tweet some events using the hashtag IW21, there are some prizes up for grabs for people who tweet some innovative ways of recording what's going on and some thoughts from the week. Okay, so before we go, we'd just like to pass you over to Mandy. And Mandy will be asking Sylvia Massy some questions, and we'll come back to the public questions after that. So over to you, Mandy.
Hi, Sylvia.
Hi, Mandy.
Happy International Women's Day.
That's right. Is it like Women's Day today? Is that right?
Yeah.
I was wondering, or do we get a month, or do we get a week? Why do we only get one day?
I don't know. Some people have made it into a month, over here.
I hope so, at least.
A lot of stuff going on for the month. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it came about or what it's about. But just hitting on that to begin with, I mean, you came into the industry at a time where were the women? Who were the women that you looked up to?
Well,
how did it start for you? I mean, yeah, such a crazy thing.
Yeah, I guess I started in the actually I'll be aging myself now, but yeah, in the late 70s actually. And there were a lot of women in
Really?
Yeah, there were more women then than there are now, which is a big surprise. But the people who were really inspirational for me were the people I used to watch go in and out of the San Francisco studio, the Automat. I used to dream of working there, and I'd watch Leslie Ann Jones and Maureen Droney come in and out of the studio. Yeah, and they were working with Santana and Jefferson Starship and these San Francisco great bands at the time, and that was the premier studio in San Francisco. So I never even thought that there was any difference between, it's like this is a job that anyone can have. And there were no real schools at the time either for engineering or production. So I just made my way through by just taking on starting level jobs in the studios in San Francisco.
So where would you say the thought came for you to think about getting into working with music? Where did that start for you? I mean, how young were you?
Oh, well, I think we probably all have a similar story, but my parents both were important in making that decision. My mother was an opera singer, so I had music around me all the time. And my dad was a mechanical engineer, and he would build his own electronics too. So he built a hi-fi and he built a tape recorder, ICO kits. They were out of kits. And then when I was 2, I remember, this is like my earliest thought is sitting in front of the tape recorder with a microphone he gave me. And I'm just talking into the mic and listening to the delay coming over the speakers. And that was fascinating to me. And at 2 years old, it's very interesting how children are affected by these very early things.
So then, yeah. So when you started listening to music for pleasure, in a sense, in your childhood. What sort of music was you drawn to?
Well, some of my very first albums that I got excited about were Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. That was a big one for me because of the orchestrations. It was very exciting. I was also very into the Led Zeppelin 2, and Alice Cooper was another one, the Killer album. And my mother was really kind of upset about all that because the cover has Alice actually hanging from a rope. And that's when I kind of went to the dark side, I guess, pretty early. Those were really important for me in the beginning. But then I also liked Simon and Garfunkel, and I liked certain pop music, and classical music. Peter and the Wolf as a child, I loved listening to that. I loved listening to sound effect records too. They were fun, especially the stereo sound effect records that came out when stereo was just being established.
Wow. So then how did you end up getting into working in a studio? Where did that come about? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I started in college. Basically, I went to university and got involved in the university radio station. And in the 70s and in the 80s, there was, a lot of new music coming up for youth. And so I learned how to use the equipment in the radio station, but I was there for the music, really. Unfortunately, radio is not about the music as much as it is about the advertising. So I got the skills to make radio commercials, and those were my first production jobs, were making broadcast commercial work, doing radio shows and commercials. And at the first opportunity I jumped ship from radio and went into music recording when I realized that that's truly what I wanted to do, because I was interested mostly in the music. So that's how that was the jumping off point, was radio, actually.
Okay, so then when you moved across into going into a studio, did you go in, did you get a job in a studio, or was you just going in with bands and working with them?
A little bit of both. I originally took a job in a place called Bear West in San Francisco, and they had an 8-track room. They had a 24-track room, but they needed an engineer for the 8-track room. I knew how to use the equipment. And so I got the job right away, and I was engineering on my first day. But it was, I realized after a while, and after working in San Francisco for several years, that in order to really make a go of it, I had to go to Los Angeles, because that's where the real work was happening. And all the albums with notoriety were coming out of Los Angeles or London. And so I made the big decision to move from San Francisco to LA, partly because I had done an album in San Francisco with Kirk Hammett. We co-produced an album by a band called Sea Hags, and the Sea Hags got a record deal out of it. It was basically a independent record that we made, but Chrysalis Records took an interest in the band and signed them. And then I thought to myself, when I heard the news, oh my God, this is my first big production, and I'll be able to go and do this record. It'll come out on Chrysalis. But instead, they went and hired Mike Klink, who was the producer, engineer who did the Guns N' Roses records. I could hardly compete with him. So in order to really, get those better gigs, I moved to LA, where Mike Klink and everyone else was.
Okay, so how long would you say you've been engineering at the point that you made that jump across to LA?
Oh, yeah, I had already been working 5 or 6 years in the San Francisco studios, and there were several that I would bounce between as an independent.
And you were already producing as well.
Yeah, I produced from day one, but the problem was when you move to LA, even with the credits that I had collected from San Francisco, I really had to start over, and I couldn't get a job in any studio. So I worked at Tower Records. It was a record store on Sunset Boulevard, and that was really the perfect place for me to be, because I met a lot of musicians there. The musicians were not only coming in to buy music, but they were working there. Most of us were involved in music in some way. So the people I was working with, a lot of them were in working bands, or, everyone was there, had an agenda. They wanted to get signed by labels. So I connected with a lot of musicians while I was at the record store. And then those people kind of led me to my first successful releases after I had produced them. And one of these bands was a band called Green Jello. And it was a comedy band, but one of the drummers, they had two drummers. One of the drummers was Danny Carey, who had another band called Tool. So we were working on Green Jello's album. The drums were set up, Danny's drums were set up, and what the heck, they're set up. Why don't we do the Tool? Let's do some Tool recording too. So we recorded an EP at the same time. And then that became Opiate with a combination of some other live recordings. So that's kind of how it all started. And I was able to actually leave my job at Tower Records and pursue work in the recording studios in Los Angeles.
And then, so am I right in saying that you worked at Larrabee for a little while?
Right. And so one of the first studios that I got an official job at was Larrabee Studios, which is a kind of a popular pop and R&B mix studio in Hollywood. And I did some of the first things I did there was work with Prince. And Prince really changed the direction of my career quite a bit. Just he really offered opportunities to a lot of starting engineers, both men and women. Never really had any doubt or indecision in having women do the engineering. So he put me to work first. At first I started as an assistant, and then I started mixing, and then we would record, and he would bring in, he would just show up, and I would have the whole ensemble ready for him. Any instrument that he would want to pick up, I was ready. And it had guitars, I had pedal boards, I had bass keyboards, I had drum machines, the samplers, and everything that I needed to help him. And then he would give me parts, and then I would assemble them into a song, and then he would come in and do the vocals over it. And it was quite a time. It was very difficult work, but it was obviously a very special experience.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I can't imagine. He was incredible. Yeah, Larrabee for me has always produced great sounding tracks that have come out of there. For me, it had a very distinctive sound, especially on the R&B. You could almost hear the room, in a sense, the equipment. You really felt it, especially with the bass. Incredible studio.
Yeah, and that had to do with the SSL, and the SSL was they were using 4000 series at the time, the E's, and then the E with the G computer, and so that was the sound of Larrabee, whereas other studios were using APIs and Neves and Harrison's and MCIs. The Larrabee really set the level for R&B on SSL, and it has that punchy low end sound that is very recognizable.
So you worked in the studio there, and then where did you go from there? How did you end up becoming more freelance and then setting up your own rooms?
Oh yeah, the Larrabee work, I spent around 3 years there, before getting enough of my, getting the opportunity to work on the Tool record. The Tool Undertow record was when I finally quit the regular job and went to complete independence, got a manager, and was able to just go gig to gig. I mean, starting out is a little scary because, you know, you never get a real regular paycheck. Usually you're kind of going from gig to gig, and sometimes there's a lot of time between gigs too. But when I'm on when I was on a job, it was usually like a month long and a lot of time in the studio. So some of the first projects that I did after Tool were these independent projects. I started to travel. I did my first album out of the country. I went to Norway and worked with a band called Simon. And then I went to the UK and worked with Skunk and Nancy and did an album there at Great Linford Manor. So yeah, it was I just kind of went with the flow of it. You know, it was like at that point, it took around 10 years from the time I started in San Francisco to when I actually started making money doing this type of work. And then, you know, the Tool thing hit. And so money started flowing a lot easier after that. And I was able to purchase a console. And the console I decided to get was a vintage Neve. At the time, it was like 1993. These vintage Neves, like the 80-28, the 80-38, they were really not very popular, especially in the UK, because they were being replaced with all the new SSLs, and everyone understood that the SSL was a better sound. But I love the graininess and the kind of the mid-rangey sound of the old Neves. So I bought one in London, and I had it shipped over to the US. I really wanted this thing, and I paid a fraction of what they're worth today. But it was a fantastic investment, and and I had it moved into the B room at Sound City, and Sound City was a studio in northern Los Angeles that was kind of the low rent kind of studio. They had one of those old Neves in there because, you know, they couldn't afford a new SSL, but the sound that was coming out of the studio was very unique, and they had so many hits that came out of this room. It was you know, Tom Petty and Rat and the Nirvana record, which was, you know, changed everything in the 90s. That was done there. The Nevermind record, I guess that's what it was called. Anyway, so hit after hit out of Sound City, and I moved my equipment into the B room. So I was in kind of a business deal with the owners of Sound City, in that I could use my room or they would rent it out, and then we would split the receivables. But so that's kind of how I got established in LA. It was the Tool record really helped, and then the purchase of this console really set me for the next 25 years. I only just sold it last year, and yeah, and when I sold it, I was able to buy a bunch of other equipment to replace it, because it's very difficult to replace that console, but it was just peak Neve. It was time to sell it, and I'm moving into a smaller space. So I want to show you. Can I grab a camera and show you what I've got going on here now?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me change cameras. I got some different cameras here. Hi, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, so so right here, I bought a brand new Rupert Neve 5088 console, and it's split into two pieces. This is one side, and the other side is over here. And that way I have my computer in the middle, and it's like a nice piece of furniture that just kind of sweeps all the way around. And then I have another console over here, which is a loop trotter, if you can see that there. and it's modular. So it's all 500 series EQs and mic pre's, and I can mix and match. And here, let's take another closer look at that.
Take a closer look at that one. I don't know.
Oh, look at that, right?
Yeah,
and so I have some vintage Angus EQs. I've got some new Mogs and Warm Audio and Black Lion Audio, mic pre's up there, and some Phoenix Audio, and then a lot of Loop Trotter modules, and they're great. You know,
yeah,
so,
I don't know them.
Yeah, well, they're it's actually a Polish company, and I just think that they're all geniuses over there. I've been to their shop, and so yeah, I'm very happy with this, just because it's so versatile, and you can customize each mic to have a different chain. It's really a sweet setup. And over here, oh, you got to see this over here. This is the WEM, and this is a vintage piece. It's from the 70s. It's a live desk, and actually it doesn't sound that good, but it looks great. So we have to have that there, right?
You have to have it just for the look. Huh?
Yeah. And then here behind, I've got a whole bunch of museum pieces, a lot of little mixers. I've got Collins and RCA and Remler and Western Electric and Operadio and Gates, all kinds of little broadcast mixers for all the little flavors. And then we also recently bought a microphone museum, and this is insane.
This is insane. I know.
Yeah, this is insane. So we bought over 2,000.
The big talk of everyone.
So, but the lights aren't on there. But take a look over here. You'll be able to see there's some of them.
No.
Oh yeah, yeah. It just goes on, and it's, God, they're just. I'm still learning. I thought I knew a lot about microphones, but in fact, I don't really know all that much. I'm still learning. Whoops. Whoa. Oh, sorry. I lost the camera. You can still see me though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah, I
good.
can still see you. I'm all right.
Okay, good. I lost the camera. Oh, there we go.
So that leads me on. I have a question from actually from my son, this one, when I said to him that I had been asked to interview you, he had a question. Now he's a jazz musician, plays piano. He's 26 and he's really into the 1900s to the 1930s. But he said, ask Sylvia whether she knows what was the first microphone that was ever used to do a live recording. And I was like, wow, that's a really sort of crazy question. Mm-hmm.
Well, I would be able to give you that. And it was a Edison. It was a microphone. And I've got one of these darn things up there, very hot. I think I can actually point the camera at it. Let me show you. This was a Edison made a phonograph that cut the signal onto a wax cylinder. And so if that would be the first recording period, you know, because Edison developed this thing that would record and play back. So the first mic that was used with that was really just a big horn. And I can show you up here. Let me turn on the floater. Hello, here I am again. And up here next to the giant Genelec, up there's a couple of those phonographs, right?
We're not seeing you yet.
Oh, you're not seeing me at all?
No, it hasn't jumped over.
Oh, okay. Well, I lost my camera.
Don't worry, we can see it. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and so that would have been the first one, was the Edison. But soon after that, and I brought out a few mics that I'd love to show. Can I show Mandy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we'd love to see. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So this here, okay. So let's go back to Alexander Graham Bell, who made the first microphone, because it was basically a telephone he was talking into one cone, and then in the other room electronically Watson was hearing it in his ear. 2 years after that, there was another fellow, David Edward Hughes, who developed a carbon microphone, and this is 1878. This is a long time ago, and this is one of the originals David Edward Hughes. It's a carbon mic, but it was a carbon pencil. And you can see in here, this little stick that's kind of suspended is just a piece of carbon. They call it a carbon pencil. And in fact, this would be hung on a wall, and then you would talk into the hole and it would vibrate this little carbon pencil. And then there was a wire coming off of each end of the carbon pencil, and it would go through a 6-volt battery or a set of batteries, and then into a little earpiece. So from another room, or from wherever you were. Yeah, these were microphones. They weren't recording at that time. The phonograph hadn't been made yet, but this was an actual one of the very, very, very first microphones. And the first carbons were improved right after that by a fellow named George Neumann. Neumann, along with Hunnings, developed the granulated carbon microphone. But Neumann, in a lab, he was working for another fellow named Reese, and Reese was making these microphones. And I guess Reese was out of town one weekend, and George Neumann in the lab developed this mic. This is it's a big block of marble rock, and it has a layer underneath the top here. It has a thin layer of carbon, granulated carbon, instead of the pencil. And the granulated carbon would vibrate easier, so it was a louder signal and a better quality signal. And so these were very, very popular mics in the late teens and the 20s. And this particular model was made by Marconi, the Marconi lab in London. So it's the Reese microphone. The design of the Reese microphone was done by George Neumann, and then it was licensed to the Marconi company. Anyway, this is the real thing. And these still work. You know, the amazing thing is these ancient mics, they all work. Even that carbon pencil mic I used on a session recently. I hooked it up with a battery. Yeah. And it worked. I couldn't believe it. It didn't sound great, but it worked. Yeah. And we actually recorded with it.
Well, that, I suppose, leads us on to, your interesting, crazy techniques of experimenting with recording. And a question around this is, how do you come up with some of these ideas to try? Where does the inspiration? I mean, my young junior engineer, Louis, was saying to me how you put a light in the chain, with your pedals, because it gave a particular sound, and how, different light bulbs will give different sounds. And it's just like, yeah, he said to me, where does she come up with even to try these things? Who inspired that? Where does it inspire from? Where?
Some of it is a kind of a dare, like we'll be sitting around and we'll be making jokes at dinner, and we'll be saying, well, you can make a clock out of a potato, right? You put the potato in water, you suspend it, and then it generates a current. Okay, well, what does a potato sound like? And we're all laughing. And then we're like, well, why don't we just try it? Let's see what a potato sounds like. And we actually hooked it up and put the speaker output of a guitar amp through a potato on the way to the speaker, right? And at first we kept on blowing fuses because we were using tube amplifiers. Now, if you go to the solid state amplifier, no problem, right? And we were actually hearing sound going through, being filtered by a potato, the potato filter. It doesn't sound that great. I mean, there's a little bit of a high shelf on a potato, but there's a lot of attenuation, so not the best filter. But okay, that led to, well, what does this sound like? Let's try this vegetable. Let's try this, and pretty soon I was plugging in hot dogs. I know it sounds weird, but all of a sudden it was like a hot dog, less attenuation, and pretty good strong signal. It was pretty flat though. It didn't really affect the sound. But now if you put a cheese dog or a cheese sausage in the circuit, all of a sudden it was like, where's this fantastic blues tone coming from? So it was like, well, this just leads to another thing and another thing. But
hold on. I've got to ask. What about a corn dog? You know, because I couldn't believe corn dogs. It was something that I never experienced till I went to America. What's that sound like?
You don't have corn dogs in the UK?
Well, no, you can buy them now. You know, I think we can get them in Costco, but no, it's not something, you know, that is part. We have a hot dog, but not a corn dog. I mean,
I have not tried a corn dog. I have not tried it. I will have to try it.
No, I think we're going to have to try the clean.
Yes, now be careful, as it is dangerous working with, you know, food and electricity. But back to the cheese dog, I have to say, why does a cheese dog sound better than a normal hot dog? Well, it's the cheese. As it turns out, if you take a chunk of cheese, and I've experimented with a lot of different cheeses, the Gouda is usually the best. You put that speaker signal through the Gouda on the way to the speaker, and you get the most beautiful blues tone. It really does affect the signal in a very good way. So, but you can do that with anything. You can put, you can actually drive electricity into an appliance just from the power coming out, not even the power, but the sound coming out of the speaker output in a solid state amp. So do that with, let's say, a drill, like the kind of drill that you plug into the wall. Well, instead of plugging it into the wall, have the speaker line go into that plug and through the electronics of the drill and then back out into the speaker. You not only get the sound of the electronics of the drill filtering your audio, but it powers the drill to move. So the electronics actually start the motors running, and then you get the harmonics of all that, the motors running, and oh my God, that's one of the most amazing experiments that I've done. And I've used this trick quite a bit in getting special guitar solos, because you get the solo and you hit certain notes and the motors are whirring and the harmonics, and it's just craziness. Light bulbs also the same way. Instead of plugging it into the wall, you don't plug it into the wall. You basically use the audio coming out of the speaker out, go through a light bulb and to a speaker, and the light bulb will light up too, depending on the type of light bulb. And like you said, Mandy, it's they all sound a little different. So there's, you know, the tungsten, and then there's the fluorescent, which is an amazing sound, and then LEDs. They all sound different. So it's really fun to experiment. So oftentimes, like when I work with artists, we'll start throwing out ideas, and I'll write down some new ideas, you know, and then I'll save a little chunk of time after we've done our important work so that we can do some experimentation. I just don't want to waste a client's time in the studio on something that may not work. So I save it. If we have time at the end of the session, we'll do some of these experiments, but I'm always writing down like, oh, we got to try this, we got to try that. I mean, there's so many great ideas.
Do you, where did you get inspired from that? Was it, you know, maybe by the sound effect records that you played when you were younger? I mean, where was the inspiration to explore?
I think you got it with the sound effect records, definitely. Creating sound, creating new sound, and doing things that people haven't done before too. I've always wanted to break the mold in that sense. So whenever I can, we'll try something entirely new. Some of the ideas work. The danger is that they don't always work, and but you can't be disappointed. It's all part of the action of making an album, and trying ideas. You know, not all of them will be great, but you can expect that something good will come out of it. And the excitement of the the journey is imprinted into the sound, and it may not be an obvious thing, but there is some kind of joy that is put into these recordings just by having the freedom to try these things, or to, you know, to make it an adventure instead of just going through the motions, you know.
No, and so inspiring for musicians that, you know, will buy an instrument that so many other people have, you know, and how to maybe
Right.
develop a sound. I mean, what a fun experiment, you know, to go on. So that leads me on to, you know, and let's get into some of the questions. Maybe, I don't know whether any questions have come up, Tom, you know, from any of the students. I've got a couple here, if not, you know.
Hi, Mandy.
See what?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
I can hear you, Mandy. Yep. Okay,
Yeah,
shall I ask a couple of questions then?
Yeah.
And you can ask a few from that you've got at your end as well. So there's been loads and loads of questions coming through, Sylvia. So
Good.
a lot about cheese actually. So someone said blues cheese instead of blue cheese. So, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Sounds
see, it's
bluesy,
the
yeah.
salt content. I believe that it's about the sodium chloride content of of cheese that is a great conductor, and I believe that's why the certain foods, the saltier the food, the saltier the cheese, the better conductivity it has.
Brilliant. Do you realise that our cost budget will now have to include cheese and potatoes and hot dogs? Okay, so just quickly, I was speaking to Chris before you came on, and he said you're setting up a Dolby Atmos suite in your place. So what's the thought behind that? Is that your next sort of project?
Well, in just keeping with the thought of doing things in a different way, I thought, well, what a joy it would be to work in immersive sound where you have multiple speakers, not just your stereo field, and but you know, elevated speakers behind, subs. So we have here, and it's installed but not connected yet. It's a 9.2.4 system. So that's 9 speakers. I do have this here. Hello. I can show you here the Genelecs, and you'll see these Genelecs here. They're 8351 Bs, and they're paired with these woofer stands, and that's my main setup for mixing. So what we've done is we've added one in the center front. So we have the regular stereo, and then we have the middle, and then we have sides, and then we have 2 in the back, and then I've got 4 up above, and then I've got 2 extra wide on the extra wide corners of the room, and then I've got 2 big subs too, plus the woofer stands. Wow, that's like 15 speakers. It's nuts. In order to connect this all together, we need a special IO, and so we're getting the Antelope. What is it? The Galaxy? Yeah, I think it's a Galaxy. Anyway, it's coming on Friday, and that has 64 ins and outs. It's a converter. Wow. So that's going to take care of everything. It'll take care of every mic pre in the room. Plus, it will allow me to send signals out to each of these 15 speakers, plus have a stereo setup too, which I use with Dangerous Music converters. Yeah, it's a monster setup, and we'll get going on it next week when we can install the new IO. And I'm looking forward to doing some really exciting immersive mixes. One of the first artists I'll be working with will be Taylor Hawkins on his project. He plays drums for the Foo Fighters, and Also, cross some fingers, I'll be able to do some work with Amin Tobin, and I don't know if you know him, but he does a lot of soundtrack work, and he's works with samples and very otherworldly music, and that will be immersive. And I'm so looking forward to this new medium.
So it seems the immersive audio is taking off a lot more across the pond than it is here.
Yeah.
It seems a lot of my colleagues out there are building rooms, and it seems from music production, it's really sort of taking off now. I know that Sony are releasing just audio only albums, aren't they, for immersive music. It's really starting to become a thing. I think we're still a little bit behind that bandwagon here, sadly. It's starting to come, but very slowly.
Well, everyone has been bitten by quad and by 5.1. These new mediums don't necessarily become standard. So maybe this will. I'm waiting for the time when they take immersive or multi-channel mixes and they apply it to autos, like have an immersive system in your auto, and I think that would be fantastic. Maybe you would stop paying attention to driving, but that's one place. We'll see.
Yeah, I've done it in headphones, but not on speakers. But yeah, it's fascinating. Well, congratulations and good luck.
Well, thank
exploring
you.
The madness of it. So there's a question here that says, can you talk through the timeline of producing an album? Now, from when you came into the industry to now, really the budgets are so different, so different. So how do you maneuver that, when you're producing? I mean,
well, there's some pros and some cons to the new way of doing things. And what I've found when someone reaches out and says, hey, we're interested in having you produce, I have to ask them some specific questions. First of all, I would like to hear a demo of the type of music that we'll be working on, so I can understand the instrumentation and the expectation of what is wanted on the project. And so then I'll calculate, well, how much time will it take to do, let's say, one song. So my general calculation is that each song with a standard type of instrumentation I would like to have 2.5 days to finish it, from the beginning, the edits, the vocals, the tuning, mixing and everything, sending out the stems. I need 2.5 days per song in order to have enough time to do it to a certain level. So that's my first calculation. And depending on the number of songs, that's one thing now, is that we're not doing albums. We're doing one song, we're doing 3 songs, we're doing 6 songs. And we might take a whole year doing just chunks of songs throughout the year. Great. And that's fantastic. That's something new that I actually do like, because working on 12 songs, usually that there's some filler on an album. There would typically be filler songs, kind of, not every song was great. So now pretty much the music is going to be better because you're concentrating on one song or 3 songs at a time. And so when I do my calculation, let's say if we were going to do 10 songs, 2.5 days a song, I need 25 days to do this album, and to do it at a level that I insist. So now I can look at studio spaces and see, well, what is it going to cost to be in the studio space for that amount of time? And then I calculate those costs in, travel costs. I have all the instruments here. You don't have to even bring anything if you don't want. So there's all those calculations. Now, after establishing the budget, now we can start working on the music. And the first thing, and this is something I learned from Rick Rubin, is that you try to get as much material to choose from as you can. So if you're looking for 3 songs, I would like to hear 30 songs, and I'd be able to pick the 3 songs which I think would propel them the farthest, and that have the most opportunity for placement or for, and sometimes it's not always everyone's favorite songs, but I will work with the artist to make sure that what they get is what they need. Like if they're looking for a record deal, we're going to do a certain type of thing. If they're just trying to be wonderful, crazy artists, then, oh my God, let's do this other thing. And we're going to spend this much time on it. So that's all very important. After establishing what music is going to be recorded, then we set up for initial tracking. I usually do pre-production in the studio with everything having been mic'd up, so that if we do changes, if we make changes and changes in the arrangements and such, we record it immediately at a high quality level. And if it's good, we just keep it, or we have alternates to another version. We have different versions of the song, and we move quickly that way. I find a lot of people don't really hear their parts until they get into the studio. They record their parts and they're soloed. So we get a chance to do that. And so I don't spend a lot of time in the rehearsal room if I can help it, just because we should be recording right from day one. Some of the stuff that happens in a rehearsal is stuff that you lose and you never get it back. So now, by doing the rehearsals and the pre-production in the studio, we capture everything. And then I try to do most of the drums at the beginning. If there's a big change in the sound of the drums, then we'll cut the session so that we record drums on this style of drumming song. And then we'll do the next batch with this other sound. So we'll split it up like that. But generally, we'll do drums, we'll do bass or guitar overdubs. We'll spend time on vocals, depending on the how strenuous the parts are for vocalists. I might do them all in a row, or I might split it out. So we do 2 songs and then work on something else. And then we have the vocalist sing another 2 songs. We work on something else, so we don't burn the vocalist out. I like to start the vocalist early so that we don't kill their voice entirely. I also don't like to have the music over rehearsed, because oftentimes if you've spent like 3 months rehearsing a song a certain way, it's going to be much harder for you to change that if you find out that your kick drum pattern doesn't match what the bass is doing, this kind of thing. So you don't have to be over rehearsed to get in the studio, but just know the songs, or we'll write them in the studio and spend some time and really get it right. There's miracles that you can do in the studio now with drums and vocals and that, but that's generally how I do it. Then after everything is all recorded, then I might send the band home, or the musicians. I'd say, okay, now I'm going to spend some time on the mixes. I'll send you the mixes. We usually work on mixes long distance, and I'll do Zoom calls, or we'll just send notes back and forth until we can really identify the finished mixes. And that's generally the way it goes, I guess. I hope that wasn't too much of an explanation.
No, it was perfect. Absolutely perfect. I loved it. I'm sure the students did, because it was such a great insight, And yeah, I forgot. Yeah, you worked with Rubin, and what an interesting producer to work, under, and learn from. I mean, how incredible.
Yeah, I learned so much from him. And the crazy thing is he's a type of producer that's different than most, because most engineers, like I came from the engineering background. So I'm an engineer producer. There's others who are musician producers, I'd say, like Pharrell, or the people that write the music and then find a singer and put the song with the singer and put that whole thing together. That's the musician producer. But Rick is neither. He's not an engineer, and he's not a musician per se. He's not writing songs, he's not writing parts or playing anything, but he's a listener, and he's a fan. He's a music fan to the point where he one of the things he does is he wants to listen to as much music as much of the client's material as possible. That's where I get the, you know, we want to record 3 songs, give me 30 to choose from. He would actually have like the System of a Down come up with like 300 songs, just little snippets of songs, you know, send him the whole everything, and then he'll pick the best. And you know that an album, you know, 12 songs picked from 300, that's going to be a great record in so many ways. So that was one thing I really learned. And Rick would not be in the sessions the entire time, depending on the artist. But typically he would hand over the reins to us, and he would say, this is what I want. I'll be back later. And then we would go forward, and we would basically be kind of producing ourselves, but not really, because he would come in, listen, and he would say, you need to do this. You need to do this. Start over with this. And it would always be just right on target. So learning from Rick was fantastic. On the other hand, he, you know, if he wasn't in the studio for System of a Down, he was there every minute of working with Johnny Cash. He had such respect for Johnny. He was there early. He would get there before I would get there. And I worked with Rick Rubin on the Johnny Cash record, where Johnny had Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers as his backup band, and all these guest artists. It was unbelievable.
Awesome.
This session. Yeah, it was, you know, and just the excitement and just it, you know, Rick was so excited to be there, and just with these people, the brilliant artists. So yeah, that was an experience. And I learned so much from Rick on that. In particular, you know, listening, that's the gig, right? Listen.
I love it. So what do you do when, say, if you're in the studio and you're with an artist and it starts going wrong, and the dynamics, you know, of the session, you know, are going wrong? How, you know, have you got any tips for the students of how you might try and pull it back? You know, how you might?
Oh yeah. Well, one thing I learned is, you know, as a producer, your job basically is to throw out ideas. You know, let's try this. Let's get, you know, I'm hearing some tuning problems. Get the tuner, you know, or anything that you're doing there to help the artist realize their vision. If suddenly there's a diversion, let's say your ideas, suddenly they start knocking them all down. They don't want to do anything. Well, the way I look at it is, it's not my music. I can't be precious with my ideas. If they don't want my ideas, well, they're paying me a whole lot of money for something, you know, I'll just be a cheerleader. If that's the role that they need me to play, then I'll just be the cheerleader. I won't put any, I won't change the arrangements or suggest any of these other things. But the funnest projects are the ones that I can really get involved with. But I'll fill the glass, whatever the shape of the glass is. I'll fill it, and I'll be able to help in the way that hopefully the artist needs. And the most important thing to remember there is, you can't be precious with your own ideas, because it's not your music. Now, if it's my music, if I'm co-writing, that's a whole other thing. But typically I will back down when someone says, nah, I don't like that idea, or let's do it this way. That's fine. Any way you want to do it.
Okay. But a question just came up from that. No, somebody's just written that you sent a vocalist out to do laps around the block, you know, to get him pissed off so that he'd come back and be able to deliver the perfect scream.
Yeah, you know.
You will use some psychology. You know?
It's about manipulating to get what you want out of the artist too. And that's, I kind of have a reputation of abusing singers that way, but it works. You know, if I really wanted to get someone angry, if someone's going to come in and go rah, screaming, and they're not really giving me an honest scream, I'll make sure that they really feel it. and it may be just to make them as uncomfortable as possible. That means turn up all the lights as bright as they go, turn down the air conditioning, make it freezing in there, and then they're just like, yeah. But then there was that time on the Undertow record where I heard the scream. Maynard sang a part on the song Crawl Away. And I'd seen them play live, and his screams live were just way more effective. So, and I wasn't getting it. And you can't make someone scream over and over again trying to get this take. We were running out of time with his throat. So I just said, hey, stop singing. We're not going to do it again. Take a break. I want you to go outside, and I want you to go around the block, and he came back in, and he was pissed. He didn't want to go outside, he was pissed, and he was pissed at me. Perfect. And he just went, raw, and it was, thank you very much. That was all we needed, So yeah, sometimes I've done things that I regret too, like the singer from System of a Down. I had him hanging upside down doing a vocal part just for the fun of it, I guess.
Did he upset you?
And then he started singing, like, well, he has a part in several parts in those songs on the debut album where he's screaming too. He's rah, and he's hanging upside down. And all the blood went to his head, and his face got all red, and his eyes started bugging out. And I was just like, no, we're not doing that anymore, So that was the last time I had anyone hanging upside down.
But yeah, how do you deal with that when I know that I can get it in the mastering room, let alone when you're recording bands, the aggression that can come out, that really upset when they're not getting what they want. And what are some of the tricks to diffuse that, that you would use? How would you, yeah.
Well, sometimes singers, when they stand in front of a microphone, they lose that kind of spontaneity that you want to hear. So they're thinking too much about their throat, and then they stop singing because, it didn't sound good. And I'm like, let me make the judgment on that. So the trick for me is to get the singer to stop thinking about their throat, because they're, they sound stilted and affected when they're thinking about it. You can hear them thinking. And so what I'll do is I'll manipulate them in certain ways to stop thinking about how bad their voice is, right? So one trick, there's several different ways to do it, but if you have a singer sing on while standing on a chair, so you raise the mic a little higher and they're standing on the chair, they're just trying not to fall off the chair. So they're thinking less about this, and they get those vocals done. And honestly, that has worked several times, is to just distract the singer in a way where they are not thinking about this anymore. And then you get this much better vocal take. A lot of times I'll have a singer maybe stand on one leg. I mean, it's just like, or an easy one that they can understand is, okay, when you're singing, express yourself with your hands and punctuate with the fist, or punctuate, or use, like you're expressing yourself, like you're speaking Italian, you're going to really be animated. Do that when you're singing. You can definitely hear a difference in the performance. And it's a more urgency behind the performance. So even though you can't see the hand waving, you can feel it, So that's some of the other things that I'll do with singers to get them to get more into character. Sometimes it's about the story of the song too. There was a singer, Adrian T. Bell, in Prague, that had a song about a prisoner who had been in jail and was being released after like 25 years. And this is a story song. And so I wanted to get that feeling of just being out on the street we recorded his footsteps in the song, walking on a street. And then I made him drink a bottle of whiskey. And then I recorded him when he was just flat blasted. And that way I got that real feeling of the guy just got out of prison. He went and got a bottle, and he's going over to the hooker now, you know, he's taking care of business right away, you know, like that's the feeling I wanted. And boy, did I get that on that session. But the singer, he was completely wasted for 2 days after that. I couldn't get any more vocals out of him. So I had to wait until he sobered up totally. But that was actually a kind of a fun session.
Wow, I love it. It's fascinating. You got him drunk. You can get drunk. Yeah, I think you do some crazy stuff, you know, to what a lot of people imagine. It's a lot more out the box. You know?
It's more entertaining to do too. I mean, you know, we get to do this job. Oh my God, it's the best gig in the world. It's so great. I pinch myself every day that I get to do this, you know.
Yeah, I know. I hear you.
Yeah. And you've got some amazing gear. I have to ask about the Emmy. Tell me, is that a mastering Emmy, or what is that?
Yeah, it's a mastering. It's a transfer console, TG console. We think because EMI were very silly, they put the serial numbers as a sticker on the back. So, of course, all the stickers have come off them, but we think it came from Paris, EMI Paris. That's where we think. But it was in a very famous cutting room here. You know, in fact, I've got a sticker up there. And this was a cutting room that did all the dub plates. And it's called Music House, and this is one of their original stickers. So they used all the dubs for all the 12 inches. And then what would happen, the DJs would come to the other studios, like the Exchange where I was working, or Abbey Road, Metropolis, or Porky's, one of the other rooms, to get the cuts done. But they would often go here, and they'd all sit on the stairs, you know, it would be open like on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And they'd queue up on the stairwell. It was in Hackney, all smoking joints, waiting to get their dubs cut. And Chris is still going. It's incredible in his studio. They don't really have a website or email. You know, you sort of phone them. It's so old school rock and roll. But he moved the studio from Hackney to Tottenham and put the desk in storage because it wouldn't fit up the stairwell and turn into the studio. And when I went to buy it, he wanted to interview me, basically. And he wouldn't let me hear it or plug it in. I couldn't tell whether it was working. It was like the craziest buy of my life, you know. It was really good faith that it worked, and it did. And yeah, I think it was more about him interviewing me to see that I'd appreciate his desk, which I do. So yeah, very blessed, you know.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So you produce videos as well, you write songs as well. I mean, you really, you know, Susan was saying about like blocks through careers, you know, was advising these students, start off, get good at something and then build. Yes, and you really are that character. You're the perfect example of how she left us with this. You know, you started here and you've just built to the point of engineering, producing, writing songs, directing videos.
They're all kind of connected a little bit.
Yeah, well, I suppose a bit, but they're all quite different hats as well. Yeah.
And it's something about that your life is only a certain amount of days. You know, you can only get good at a few things by working at it really hard. So make your choices, you know, carefully, and you'll have a great, happy life. But you, in as far as production and engineering, if you have another specialty that you can add to make you more than just an engineer or more than just a producer, let's say you can do string arrangements, or you sing your own backing vocals, or even like being as an expert on web design. You know, these kind of things will give you an edge over someone else who is limited to just being an engineer or a Pro Tools engineer at that. The more that you can diversify, the better. For me, it's all kind of been related to this popular music, you know, whether it's doing video or working, you know, developing a different type of a gear or technique. It's all kind of in that same pool, but there's something that I've put aside my entire life that I really, really want to do now, and that's to paint. I'm a visual artist, and I have not spent enough time painting. So I'm going to, at some point, really slow down the production side of it and
Mandy,
do
are you still there?
Yeah.
more. Yeah, and so that's what I want to do. I want to paint too.
Well, yeah, that brings us on to your book, and the illustrations are just incredible, and especially for me to look at, because so many characters that, you know, I've seen talk or I've met, you know, all over it, and they're just such fun.
Yeah, the characters that are part of our peer group they are like cartoons, you know. Some of them are pretty funny and legendary. So, and thank you. I really enjoyed making this book, and we're making a second version of Recording Unhinged as well. We've been working on a microphone book that will be out later on this year, and it's the ultimate vintage microphone book, because we have the collection. So there will be at least 600 entries in it with some really nice pictures and a lot of information about how these mics are made and everything. Stories from different people on how they use their mics and which ones are their favorites. And I'd love to get some information from you about that, Mandy. If you've got a particular microphone that you like, I'd love to hear about it.
No, I don't really. I got into mastering really quite soon. You know, I finished studying and taped up in studios for no money, and then went into mastering, and have not really been involved with the recording side of it. It probably would have been where I went if I hadn't gone mastering, but yeah, I went into mastering. That's been my thing.
Well, you're the top of the heap of that.
I do what I do, like you. And if people like it, they like it. That's all we can hope for, isn't it?
Yeah.
That people keep wanting to work with us and enjoy our process. That's the best we can ask for. So I'm going to go back to Tom to see whether any questions have come up, because, you know, I can't keep up with it scrolling. I know people are really enjoying everything that we're talking about, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, the chat room is absolutely flooded with questions, so lots and lots. So I'll do the broader ones, I guess, and then might get some time for some specific artists, like a lot of people asking about Tool and Rick Rubin and stuff like that. But I'll stick with the broad one for now. So which aspects of the industry from your experience have changed the most, and how important is adaptability in the industry?
Yeah, the technology is constantly changing, and I started in tape, 2-inch tape recording, and I was an expert at a razor blade editing, but that all changed, you know. And then accepting new technology is probably one of the hardest things to get through in this. And the technology is always changing. So, for instance, just the digital recording in general. Mixing in the box, that was something that I really had to spend years trying to master, how to keep my headroom under control. And so what I do now, as an example, is when I get a set of files from a client who wants a mix, they're sent usually through a WeTransfer or some online service. I take those files and I load them into a new Pro Tools session, and then and they're usually WAV files. And then the first thing I do is I select all the tracks and I bring them all down -15. And that seems like a lot, But in fact, there's enough bit depth that you can bring it down that much and not affect the quality, I've found anyway. Some people might argue about that. But bringing everything down -15 before I load it into a template or do anything else to it in a mix will allow me a lot more room to work. And I found that has made such a humongous difference in mixing for me, just to have that upper headroom. So the technology is always tricky, and there's always improvements, and then there's changes that are not necessarily improvements, but make storage easier or less expensive to get the items. Isn't it exciting that everyone, it seems like now's the time when everyone can be setting up studios at home and doing their recording on their own. That means the big change recently is that I do get more mixes because people are working at home and they just need a lot of help finishing and polishing the work that they've done. So that's one thing that's changed a lot. I don't have to be in Los Angeles anymore to have a career. In fact, I live in Oregon, which is way up the coast in Ashland, Oregon. It's just a little hamlet, it's a beautiful little town. And I travel to LA every once in a while, maybe twice or 3 times a year. But really, this is I have everything I need here. If someone wants to come up here, great. But usually they just send files, and I work on them remotely. That's one of the nicest things about the changes that have happened. But there will always be more changes, and get ready for that. I'm still trying, like the immersive. That's something that I want to know about, and I want to get good at it. So I have to push myself into it.
Thank you.
No, we have to jump into new things,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we are scientists, so
Yeah.
it is about science, isn't it?
Yeah.
So any more questions, Tom?
Yeah, we've got. Have you got a biggest regret, or any regrets that maybe someone you had the chance to work with, but you didn't actually get to work with in the end?
Yeah, there's a few of those. Yeah, there is. Some of them I don't actually regret, but at the time maybe I did. Like once, there was a band called Limp Bizkit. I don't know how big Limp Bizkit was in the UK. Do you know this band?
Yeah, pretty
Right.
big. Yeah,
pretty big,
like
pretty big.
Rap rock, 90s. Anyway, at the height of their right after their debut, they were looking for a producer, and they flew me out to New York to come see a show in Poughkeepsie, which is upstate New York. And I rented a car, and I flew into New York and rented a car and drove up there and saw the show. And I was a bit horrified, just because there was, the Fred Durst was dragging girls up on stage and having them take their tops off, and there was a little titty show. It was like, I wasn't into that so much, but then they flew me out. So I was going to meet with them on the bus after the show. So I found myself standing in line with a bunch of girls waiting to get on the bus at the end of the session or at the end of the show. And I was just like, I'm not doing this. So I just hopped in the rental car and I just drove off. I drove to Maine and I went whale watching. I was just like, no, I don't care. Thanks for the trip, but I'm not interested. Of course, that record was their second record that, I ran away from it. And it was a huge record. I would have, been able to buy houses with the proceeds of those royalties, but I missed that one. So there's that regret. I guess it's a regret. I don't know. I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out, actually.
To think about it must have been quite challenging for you, with some of the bands you play with, especially the rock, that whole stigma of the party and the girls, having to, I suppose you end up being like one of the lads in the room, because they're so open.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's usually how I break the ice with a new group of people, by just cursing, like I can curse like a sailor, and I've got some disgusting jokes that'll just put them all down, so I start just to make them feel comfortable. Ultimately, there's things that I just don't like that, I won't put up with, but yeah. Most
I
of it,
do
I'm
remember
fine.
some years back. I'm pretty sure it was you that you had a band in, and they trashed the residential
God, yes.
part of where they were staying.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
They seriously trashed it.
from first to last, it was nuts. What we found, it was funny. It was so bad. I mean,
Yeah.
beer bottles and pizza and a blow up doll and a
The
snake
toilet.
and
It was
the
the
toilet.
toilet.
Oh my God, it was just disgusting. But
It looked very rock and roll, but
yeah, very
very
rock.
uncool as well.
Yeah.
It should have been an album cover, really.
Oh God, yes. And the other
Tom.
thing is, like, running a studio, and you have cleaning staff and whatever. I had a studio in Northern California with 5 rooms. It was called Radio Star, and over time, I had it for 15 years, and over time, it grew. It was really a great setup in an old theater. But I would have cleaning crew come in, and invariably, the cleaning girls would run off with the drummers. I don't know what it is about that, but anyway, we had issues like that. Yeah.
Thanks. Sylvia, there's a lot of questions about working with Tool on Undertow,
Okay.
and I guess the piano incident is you talk about resisting your ideas, but it seemed that Tool really enjoyed messing about with the piano, shall we say? So, can you tell us a little bit about that album and the thoughts behind it, and the famous piano incident, I guess?
Oh yeah. Well, this was one of those things, which was a very early session for me. And I thought, well, let's do something that no one else has done. Let's make sounds that no one else has. Let's do something completely outrageous. So I thought of getting a couple of pianos, and the original idea was that I would get a crane and lift the piano up and drop it, and then we would record the smashing of the piano hitting the ground and how spectacular that would be. But I couldn't get a crane operator to go with me on this. So I got the pianos delivered to the studio, and there was a back room in the studio that was kind of a garage area, a covered garage area. And Danny brought his shotgun. He had a sawed-off shotgun, and it's an American thing. And then we had sledgehammers. I bought sledgehammers. I bought everyone safety goggles so everyone would be safe, and pickaxe and some other tools, and then mic'd up the piano and recorded. This was at the very end of the session, after everything else had been recorded, that we did this. We had time, we had a budget. I had to pay for the pianos with that out of the studio budget, so we did have a little bit left, and we had enough time. So we just smashed the hell out of these pianos, and then we made a piece of music out of it, but by taking all the sounds and creating samples out of them, and then creating this piece of music called Disgustipated, and that's at the end of Undertow, and it's kind of a ridiculous sounding thing, but that's all pieces of smashed piano ultimately. So yeah, that was the first time I was like, man, we got to do something crazy that no one else has done. From then on, I kind of set up something like this on every session, whether it's recording something in a certain way or going somewhere to record. And so, but the Tool records were really special. And this is just a great band, The best thing to do if you want to win is to just work with musicians that have great and original music. And I was a fan of theirs right from the start. So it was I had to really screw up in order to fuck up that recording, because it's just, as long as everything was on and recording, boy, I was going to get some great performances. There's no doubt. That's just a great band.
Yeah, great sounding.
Yeah, but they
sounding.
record
Thank
differently
you.
now. They don't record together, and you can. I think you can hear
Yeah,
it.
you hear it.
Yeah,
the early stuff is.
The early stuff that was all written together, but the stuff they do now and later, they were completely separate from each other. And Maynard lives in Arizona, and the other band members live in LA, and they just send files back and forth. They're never really together anymore, unless they tour.
Right, thanks, Sylvia. I
Yeah.
think we're probably at the end now, so I'll just ask you one final question, just for all our students, the budding engineers and producers.
Yeah.
So just one bit of advice that you could give a starting students starting their careers in this world and production, engineering. Just one bit of advice.
Yeah. Well, I'd say if you're getting started, you just remember to be a good hang. You got to be, in order for someone to invite you into their band or their project like this, they have to trust you. They have to like you. So you got to learn to be a good hang and to not be too precious about your ideas. And you can't be easily offended. And this is just good advice for anyone in the world. I mean, so many wars are started just because people are offended by, So if you just accept that every once in a while someone's going to say something that you might consider to be a personal attack, just let it roll off your back. Don't take anything too personally. And just be a fun person to hang around in the studio and know your stuff. I mean, learn your stuff or fake your way in. Either way, you're gonna learn something. You're gonna be in the session. You'll be learning all the way to the end of your days. So get ready for that and really enjoy it. It's just a great gig, and we're so lucky to get to be doing this. So stick with it.
Okay, and they're asking, what's the name of your dog, Sylvia?
Oh,
they saw your dog just pop by.
That's Bick. That's little Bick, and she's a sweetheart, and I love her. Yeah, she's my buddy.
Big Fisher. Okay, so I think we're about out of time now. So a massive thank you to Sylvia. That was really, really great.
Of
Some
course.
amazing questions.
It's amazing.
And thank you to Mandy as
man.
well for asking the questions for Susan and Sylvia and her own interview this morning as well. With that, it's just been such an amazing experience for all our students and just a massive insight into some amazing talents and ways of working. Very different ways of working, I think we've had today, haven't we? So. Yeah. Thank you so much for
Well, sure. I
joining us
really enjoyed it. Thanks for the invite, and I can't wait to get on a plane and come over and visit again.
Brilliant. We'd love